I was the first to go to college in my family, and a minority at my institution. So not only did I miss my family immensely, but I also had no idea how college worked half the time.
It began when my ex broke up with me out of the blue over text.
I was raped on the bathroom floor of a college dorm on a Christian college campus.
And from the outside, things seemed to be going well. What I didn't tell people was how incredibly lonely and out of place I felt.
We were long distance, and it came out of nowhere. I was in my room crying, and he was sending me memes. I told him I couldn't talk. My boyfriend had just dumped me. He suddenly became very interested in me.
I was pinned underneath him and woke up after blacking out with bruises on my spine.
I struggled to find others that could relate to what I was going through. Then I met him.
Fast forward a week. There was a dorm event, and he and I had been making jokes during it with our friends. We had been friends before everything had happened.
He locked the door and ignored my cries for help.
We lived in the same dorm, so I had seen him. But in the spring semester, I talked to him more. He made me laugh, he cared about his faith, and we had some overlapping experiences. We became friends.
Later that night, I was getting ready for bed, and he was Snapchatting me. Suddenly, all of his pictures he was replying with were of him shirtless. I was uncomfortable and asked him why he did that. Things quickly spiraled out of control.
Sexual assault on college campus is extremely possible.
One night, he and I went to his room. I stayed the night. I never kissed anyone before, and he knew that, and I went into it just wanting someone to hug me, to hold me at night while I slept.
He started sending me very explicit and sexual things, saying horrible, horrible things, and asking for me to send him nudes.
Before I became a victim, I had never been aware of the attempts of others to silence people of crimes of a sexual nature.
He told me that if anything he did made me uncomfortable, just to let him know. And I trusted that. I trusted him.
I kept saying no and stop, but he didn't. It was starting to get late, and I was crying. I told him I was, and suddenly he started apologizing and saying he wanted to meet me in the lobby to talk and apologize.
It's all over the place. Every woman has a story, and it's our responsibility to restore the dignity of a community that claims caring for our neighbors.
First we cuddled and talked. Then he kissed me, and I instantly felt conflicted because this wasn't something I had planned. But I began to tell myself that he went to his room, and of course he would expect a kiss. And for me to say no would make me a bad person.
We were friends, and I was a trusting person. I was willing to forgive people, especially my friends. I agreed to meet up with him in the lobby. I got dressed again in the outfit I had been wearing earlier that Friday. Upon getting down to the lobby, he said we should go and talk about it outside. Okay.
So we kissed and made out for a while. But then I noticed his head start to go further down my body so he could perform oral sex. I grabbed his head gently, said no, and he moved back up to kiss me. He proceeded to do this a total of 5 times.
We walked outside and we talked for a few minutes when he aggressively kissed and groped my chest. I slapped him. He told me it was God's will for him to do this. He said it was God's will for him to get back with his ex-girlfriend and that it included assaulting me.
And on the 5th time, my body froze because I realized what was happening. That I kept saying no and he kept trying, and since he didn't hear me say no that time, he went down. After my therapy sessions, I can now remember how scared I felt. I was scared he would get violent if I said no again. Scared he would be verbally abusive if I said no again. Scared he would tell other people if I said no again.
We walked back to my dorm, said goodnight, and I thought it was the end of it. The next day, Saturday, he started sexually harassing me again over Snapchat. I walk over to his dorm room and make him open the door. I tell him he needs to stop. What he's doing isn't healthy, and he should get help. He grabs my butt, thrusts against me, and aggressively kisses me again. I leave quickly, hoping nobody had happened to walk by and see what he did. The following week consisted of me being uneasy around him, but still attempting to be his friend, while he would sexually harass me each night over Snapchat.
I was scared of a society that has told me to give in to guys like him. simply because they are nice and therefore I should award kind persistence with a yes, regardless of how uncomfortable I felt. Scared of a society that in the end would determine that it was all my fault because I should have left or fought back. But when someone is violating you, rational decisions do not fill your brain. All you feel is the freezing pain of someone manipulating their way inside you and hollowing you from within.
I would tell him to stop, say no, and tell him that he needs to get help for his depression and porn addiction. He refused and kept demanding nudes from me while also claiming how much of this was God's will for this to happen to me. All of a sudden, one night, he decides he's done with me. He drops nearly all contact except to frantically text me when he thinks I reported him to our RD. At that point, I hadn't. A week later, I did. Between harassment texts, he would beg and plead with me not to report him or I'd ruin his life. I felt so conflicted reporting him because he had been my friend. I didn't want to hurt my friends.
As he sexually assaulted me, it was like my mind and body disconnected. I felt so overwhelmed, and I just kept thinking how I could get him to stop, but not be upset with me. So I decided performing oral sex on him would get him to stop and keep me safe. So I did, and afterwards I left to my room.
I didn't think I was going to be able to survive that semester. By God's grace, I did.
Afterwards, I left to my room. I began crying, and in that moment, I couldn't have told you why I was crying. I didn't realize that what happened that night was a sexual assault until 2 years later, during my junior year, during a presentation on sexual assault. I learned in counseling that my brain had taken that night, and in a sense blurred the parts of that night that involved my sexual assault as a way of protecting me. Even though my realization didn't occur till junior year, it negatively impacted the way I connected to my friends, family, and potential romantic interests even before then. To this day, my sexual assault still continues to impact my mental health. From intimacy issues to depression to suicidal ideation. I realize now that what he did was wrong. He manipulated me and took advantage of the fact that I was inexperienced, and when it came to consensual physical intimacy, and in pain from my feelings of loneliness and low self-esteem. He thought if he just kept pushing nicely, that no would turn into yes. And although he took my silence for a yes, it was never a yes.
I did what was right. I tried to help someone I thought was my friend and keep the other young women on campus safe. As for my assaulter, it's up to God's will now.
Wow. That's heavy.
So, I think this is a very heavy topic overall. And I think that this is not uncommon, which is really sad also, because I've heard a lot of this happening on campus, off campus. A lot of these stories are very similar, so it's, it's not shocking, but it is still sad.
This just honestly breaks my heart to know that this happened to this individual and to so many other people whose stories are never going to be shared.
I think it's sad that this happens on a lot of college campuses, and it breaks my heart that especially at a Christian campus this is happening.
I'm not really surprised that this happened on a Christian campus, although I think there's kind of this idea that people on Christian campuses have that nothing bad ever happens there, or that people are so good and would never do something as awful as sexually assault someone, and unfortunately that's not the case.
It's disgusting that as believers we aren't going to find justice or even hold each other accountable for these kinds of events. And it's really, really aggravating.